How to have a great idea when you've got no time at all. Somebody has given you a problem to solve. This is excellent because you are all creative people. That's the good news. But the bad news is that they've given you hardly any time to solve it. And you know how it goes. The clock ticks loudly behind you. You are in a vortex of anxiety, a paroxysm of panic. Your instant reaction is probably, fuck, what am I going to do? Well, first thing is make a nice cup of tea and then remember that inspiration literally means take a deep breath, chill out. It's impossible to have a great idea if you're stressed. So the first thing is to acquire a little bit of equilibrium. I usually get a bit of music on, something ambient in the background. I've got a playlist of ambient beats. This is a great playlist on Spotify called Music for Brainwaves, which has been created by neuroscientists. And the idea is that the frequencies put your brain in a particularly receptive state to the great ideas that may be passing by. Another one that I chanced upon recently is My Noise, and this is quite good for procrastinating, as well as ambient sounds. But it's a wonderful site where you can select different ambiences and then mess around with the EQ. There's like white noise and waterfalls, as well as drones and things like that. So you've taken a deep breath, you've got some ambient tunes on in the background, you've made yourself a nice cup of tea, and somebody's saying the slides are showing on my side. Yes, just Richard has got the connecting wheel. Can everybody see the slides? Okay, works for me. Excellent. That's reassuring. Thanks, guys. Yeah, Richard, maybe try refreshing. Next step. What is the most obvious idea you can come up with? So this is nothing complicated at all. If it's a TV commercial you've got to write, then maybe it's just a piece to camera, somebody describing the product. It is the most obvious, literal, boring idea you can think of, and you write it down. The reason you do this is because you have to start. Even in doing that, you've got to think about the problem and think about what's important. But then you've got something, and it's terrible. It's not going to win you a bonus. But if you had to hand it in, it's not going to get you sacked either. And that will help take just a little bit of the pressure off and help you clarify what is important in this project. However, the clock is still ticking threateningly behind you, and time is your greatest asset now. So how you use that is going to be critical in determining your success. So how long have you got? Let's say, for argument's sake, you've got a couple of hours. It's 4 o'clock. You've got this email. Your boss says, I need an idea by 6 o'clock. So on the left of the screen is now 4 o'clock. On the right is your deadline, 6 o'clock. You're going to divide your time straight down the middle. That line is 5 p.m. Before 5 p.m, from 4 till 5, it's all going to be about opening up. And then from 5 till 6, the second half, it's about distillation. And there are two very different mental processes going on from 4 to 5 and 5 to 6. And the more you can separate these two, the more you can pull them apart, the better your ideas are likely to be. So really, that first 50% is about exploring. It's roaming freely across the plains of your mental territory, if I can stretch my metaphor a little. And then from 5 till 6, the second half, it's about exploitation. So you're going to narrow your focus and work the territory. I've just written an article, which will be on my blog and in the mailer next week, about something I heard Brian Eno say. He said, creatives are cowboys or farmers. Now, I think creatives are cowboys, farmers, and monks, but I quite like the analogy for the purposes of this. So to begin with, you're a cowboy or a cow person. Unfortunately, cowboy is a little gendered, but my apologies. Brian Eno started it, but you're on your horse and you're roaming the plains. You're exploring territory, and then when you found somewhere that feels fertile, that feels fruitful, then you're going to work it. Regular listeners will, thank you, Sarah. It's a good one. He's brilliant. We'll return to Brian Eno a little bit later on and his oblique strategy cards. Regular listeners to my waffling will know that one of my creative heroes is the nun, Sister Corita Kent. Sister Corita Kent was an artist, and she made extraordinary, beautiful, big, bright, bold, colourful work. She was like really switched on as well. She was really behind the civil rights movement early on and anti-Vietnam. It's a tragedy that she's not better known, but she became quite well known in her lifetime. She made stamps for the US Postal Service that sold over 700 million copies. Do check her out if you're at all curious. And Sister Corita wasn't just a nun and an artist, but she was a teacher of creativity. One of the things she did that I most love is her oblique strategy cards. No, that's Brian Eno. I'm reading Daniela's message. It was her art department rules, which I have hanging up here on the wall of my shed. Get a little look around the shed, just up there, because I think they're so important. They coordinate quite nicely with my sweatshirt today as well. Yeah, and rule number 8 is this. Don't try to create and analyze at the same time their different processes. Corita felt this instinctively, but neuroscience has proved it to be true. When you're in a creative mode, you're relying on spontaneous thought. And when you're in an analytical mode, it's evaluative. It's the brain's executive center. And these are two different circuits in the brain. And the problem most people run into is that they'll have an idea and then they'll immediately evaluate it. Is it any good? And if you do that, you're switching circuits, you're arresting the creative process, you're stopping before you've even begun. So in that first half, 4 till 5, it's all about creation. And then the second half, this is the thing that's hard to get right. Your instinct is to evaluate, but you've got to put it off. You've got an hour from 5 till 6 to evaluate. You're not going to do any evaluation before 5 o'clock. And remember with creativity that quantity is the path to quality. Forget about quality. If you concern yourself only with quantity, the number of ideas you can come up with, then quality will follow. There's been quite a lot of research done on the most innovative, groundbreaking artists and thinkers and business people. And generally speaking, they don't have a better ratio of good ideas to shit ideas than the rest of us. They simply work on having more and more ideas. So their ratio is the same, but because they've had more ideas, they've got more good ones. Think only about quantity. That is your first task. So to recap, before I share 10 strategies that you can employ when you're roaming the plains, you begin as a cowboy. It's all about exploration. Think only of quantity and try and relax, be carefree, sink into it, trust the process. And the more you do this, the more comfortable you are to trust the process. Then halfway through, if you've got 2 hours, 2 days, even 2 weeks on a big project, try and use this formula. You become a farmer. You go, right, okay, this territory feels fruitful. I'm going to exploit it. I'm going to look only for the best of my ideas, and I'm going to be ruthless in discarding anything that seems derivative. That's the first bit. Okay, we all good out there in Chatland? I think there's a bit of a lag, but maybe you've gone. No, excellent. Thanks, guys. Cool. So 10 strategies. 10 strategies. The first one is this. What if you begin with the worst idea? So about 40 years ago, maybe a little longer, 2 advertising creatives in New York, Roy Grace and John Noble, had yet another car brief. they were getting a bit sick of their reputation for advertising cars because it meant they kept getting the same brief again and again. So Roy said to John, he said, what is the worst possible idea, John, that we can come up with? What is the most terrible, inappropriate scenario for selling a car? And John said, I don't know. What about a funeral? And Roy said, brilliant, let's do that.
I'm actually mind and body to hereby bequeath the following. To my wife, Rose, who spent money like there was no tomorrow, I leave $100 and a calendar. To my sons, Rodney and Victor, who spent every dime I ever gave them on fancy cars and fast women, I leave $50 in dimes. To my business partner, Jules, whose only motto was spend, 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 I leave nothing, nothing, nothing. And to my other friends and relatives who also never learned the value of a dollar, I leave $1. Finally, to my nephew Harold, who oft-times said, a penny saved is a penny earned, and who also oft-times said, gee, Uncle Max, it sure pays to own a Volkswagen. I leave my entire fortune of $100 billion.
Boom. An advertising classic was born. So I really love this question, and it's great when you're feeling the pressure. It's a really nice way to begin a brainstorm with a colleague. If you begin by asking what's the worst possible idea, then it kind of takes the pressure off. You know, you're no longer in search of quality, and it's usually funny. And weirdly, it takes you down a really odd path because, you know, you're heading off in search of a terrible idea. Very often that is the foundation of something really interesting. Strategy number 2 is, can you make the problem the solution? So one of my favorite stories from last year concerned these things. Does anybody recognize these rather unpleasant pieces of urban furniture? Yes. Bird spikes. Well done, Sam. Yes. Sarah just said yes. She didn't say bird spikes. So I think the prize, the virtual prize, has to go to Sam for being quickest off the mark. Yeah, the bird spikes. I don't like bird spikes. I like birds. And I was distraught to discover in Bristol. I live about 45 minutes from Bristol. There's a posh area of Bristol called Clifton, where they've put anti-bird spikes on the branches of trees to stop them shitting on the cars below. This is a terrible thing. So I read last year that members of the corvid family, really smart birds like magpies and crows and jays, are starting to use the spikes to make nests. This is really, really lovely. And the spikes are a great sort of architectural material for the birds, because not only can they use them for the infrastructure of the nest, but they deter predators because they've got spikes on them. And the person who discovered this was a naturalist who I believe is Dutch. So it's interesting, Julie Marta, that you know these very well in Amsterdam. Auke Florian Hjemstra, I think he was Dutch. He was the naturalist who first observed this behavior. And what's wonderful is he has hair like a bird's nest too, which I'm sure has not escaped him or his colleagues. And it's a wonderful illustration of taking something which seems to be a problem, really embracing the problem and flipping it. And it can be a super elegant, innovative, creative strategy. Another classic illustration of this is from Avis. So Avis is the car rental company, and for a long time they were number 2 to Hertz. So they went to their agency, DDB, which was also Roy Grace and John Noble's agency, and they said, look, we need a campaign to try and steal a lead on Hertz. We got these amazing new super torque Fords. Maybe we could do something about that. And the agency said, well, no, what if we take your problem? What if we take the fact that you're number 2 and we flip that into a positive? Avis is only number 2 in rent-a-cars, So why go with us? We try harder. When you're not the biggest, you have to. We just can't afford dirty ashtrays or half-empty gas tanks or worn wipers or unwashed cars or low tires or anything less than seat adjusters that adjust, heaters that heat, defrosters that defrost. Obviously, the thing we try hardest for is just to be nice, to start you out right with a new car like a lively Super Torque Ford and a pleasant smile, to know, say, where you get a good pastrami sandwich in Duluth. Why? Because we can't afford to take you for granted. Go with us next time. The line at our counter is shorter. Beautiful piece of copywriting, beautiful piece of strategy. And this strategy is used again and again, often in really nice award-winning pieces of advertising. Famously, Guinness used it in the UK. The nation's all-time favourite ad, according to Channel 4 poll, was the Guinness Surfer ad. The tragic thing now, as a 50-year-old man, is I realise that when I'm doing these talks, some of the people in the audience will be too young to remember this, which to me seems like only yesterday. So if you don't know it, do look it up. Directed by Jonathan Glazer, one of our great directors. But the thought behind this was the thing that makes Guinness different is the fact you've got to wait for your pint. You know, the person pouring the pint will let the pint settle, they'll leave it, and for Guinness, this was a problem. It's like, people aren't going to order our drink because it takes longer than other drinks. The agency said, no, this is the thing that makes it different. Modern life, or life 20 years ago, is still chaotic and noisy and too fast. So what if we make a whole campaign, good things come to those who wait? Tick follows talk. Exactly, James. There was a wonderful campaign recently for an Ecuadorian salt brand. And I didn't want to play the film because it's a couple of minutes, but it's really worth looking up. They're called Cristal. And in South America, salt is unlucky. So they tried to sponsor the Ecuadorian football team. And the Ecuadorian football team said, what, are you kidding? There's no way we're going to let you, a salt brand, sponsor us because, you know, we'll lose. So this Ecuadorian salt brand said, well, hang on a minute. What if we sponsor Ecuador's rivals? So they sponsored Peru and Colombia and Chile and Brazil. And the weird thing was, in the you see this in the film, in the playoffs, the opposition kept having loads of injuries. Neymar couldn't play for Brazil, star player against Ecuador. And then in the final, in the final playoff qualifier, Ecuador scored a penalty and went through to the World Cup. Can you flip the problem into a solution? Number 3, when it comes to advertising and marketing and communication of any kind, your most powerful weapon is the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Those of you who've attended one of my copywriting workshops will be familiar with this next thing because I love it so much. It's a local ad for a heating, ventilation and air conditioning company, HVAC, and it ran in a small paper in Detroit, in Michigan. I can't pretend like everything is okay. Gun fetishes are being prioritized. Women are no longer in control of their own bodies. The earth is heating up. Black and brown people are still being killed, brutalized, or otherwise harassed. Honestly, at this point, who gives a shit about HVAC? But if you're hot, give us a call. All Star Mechanical Heating and Cooling. Boom, the truth. And boy, does it leap out at you from the page. So another strategy is just tell it like it is. Discard the advertising obfuscation and the cliches and the riddles and the tropes. Just go out there and tell it like it is. A year or so ago, I was in New York doing one of these things, and I was just walking on one of the cross streets. I saw this sign for a pizza restaurant. Pizza, no pizza. Boom. It made me smile. It was only 10:30 in the morning, so it didn't make me stop and get pizza. But had I been there longer, I would have gone back. Super simple, 3 words. Oasis did this last year. The whole thing about Oasis is a refreshing drink. And so their thing was refreshing honesty. It's summer, you're thirsty, we've got sales targets. Your favourite celeb would drink Oasis if we paid them. And the rather meta lunch without Oasis is like a boring poster. Yeah, it's the truth, unvarnished. I think the best definition of a great piece of communication is a simple truth told in a surprising way. I think that really this is all we're trying to do. This is what great art, great music, great movies, great advertising, that's what it all is, really. A simple truth, something that resonates with your audience, presented to them in a way they've not seen or heard before. So one thing you can do when you've got the brief in your exploratory phase, is to write down as many truths as you can about your product, list them, and then think of as many ways you can to illustrate each truth. So let's say, for instance, I have 2 teenage children who have complete disregard for any kind of vitamin input at all, and it's all about pot noodles. So let's say you've got to come up with an idea to promote pot noodles, and you just write down things that come off the top of your head to do with pot noodle. Nothing fills a hole like a pot noodle. That works. That's the truth. It's quick. It's filling. How might we illustrate this? Well, what if we just fill some holes with pot noodle? Bingo, there we go. Nothing fills a hole like a pot noodle. It's a daft, irreverent brand. These big, bold, nice images, are not afraid to make the product look a little bit, but it's a simple truth told in a surprising way. And like any great advertising idea, it's campaignable because there are lots of potential executions that can easily be worked out. I'm sure you can probably think of some other holes that could be filled with a pot noodle, but we probably shouldn't go there because, oh man, I'm going off on a weird tip. It's 1:25. Maybe for the post watershed, we'll do that one another time. Let's move swiftly on to number 4. Can you take something away? One of the most interesting pieces of research I've read to do with the creative process, and I read quite a lot of these papers, was something from a couple of years ago. Thanks, Lewis. That it was a guy called Leidy Klotz, a researcher at the University of Virginia. And he made an important discovery, which is that as adults, not necessarily as children, but as adults, when we have to solve a problem, our instinct is to introduce other elements, when actually taking away existing elements would be simpler, quicker, and more effective. And a really nice illustration of this is stabilizers on a bike. So 45 years ago, when I was learning to ride a bike, my dad put stabilizers on, and they stopped me falling off, but they were rubbish. I couldn't go around corners very well. The bike was always wobbling. I got stuck on gravel drives, and there came a point where my dad said, right, we're going to take the stabilizers off. And I rode about 15 yards down the street and fell off and grazed my knees. These days, kids learn to ride on a balance bike, which is a bike with the pedals removed. Much, much better. They learn how to ride without even realizing they're learning how to ride. And sometimes you have to work to defy this instinct. Picasso, 1945, sketched a bull. He was a brilliant series about Picasso on the BBC at the moment. Looks at the dark side of him too. He was a notorious philanderer. He was also very into bulls, being Spanish. And he in 1945, just before Christmas, he made this etching of a bull. He wasn't totally happy with it, so he sort of changed the dimensions. And over the course of 11 lithographs, he played with the shape and the form of the bull. But the really interesting thing is that over time, this bull just becomes simpler until after 11 lithographs, we arrive here. Picasso's bull, the absolute essence of a bull described in as concise a form as possible. And Picasso arrived at a ball which is inescapably Picasso and nobody else's, not by adding things, but by taking things away. So just towards the end of 2023, Netflix ran a campaign for Lupin. I have to admit, I watched the first couple of episodes of Lupin, didn't really grab me, but a lot of people love Lupin. It's about a jewel thief in Paris. And season 2, I think, was returning. So Netflix were doing a campaign where they didn't need to tell people what Lupin was because the audience was already out there. They just needed to let people know that Lupin was coming back. And I thought the campaign was brilliant. They'd obviously asked themselves this question: is there something the audience is familiar with that we can lose? So here's one of the ads. So it's got all the sort of vibe of a high-end jewelry advert for a posh watch, but the watch is missing. Or this, the jewelry is missing. Brilliant. And you've just got to do a little bit of work, haven't you? Go, okay, it's a jewelry ad, but the jewelry's gone. Lupin's a jewel thief. Lupin is back on Netflix. Bingo, I've got it. And as I wrote about only recently, leaving a little gap for your audience is a super important strategy. But to get to this place, what can you take away? Number 5 is to give yourself a constraint. So last year, I discovered Georges Perec. If there are any French people on the call, they will be familiar, I think, with Georges Perec. I'm just breaking briefly to look at Callie's note. Universal Everything, who do some outstanding motion graphics, done some cool motion experiments, reducing things to the minimum viable form we recognize as human. Similar sort of idea. Yeah, I don't know about that, Callie, but that sounds great. And exactly the kind of thing I could insert into my presentation at this point. So thanks for the tip. Georges Perec, then, extraordinary writer, and he was part of a group of writers called the Oulipo, the Ouvroir Literature Potentielle, I think. And one of the books that he wrote, for which he became famous, was a book known as La Disparition in French, The Disappearance, and the title was translated as A Void in English. And the really noteworthy thing about this book, something that even the first few reviewers missed, was that the entire book is written without the letter E. Now, even if you're not French, you will know that the is quite an important word. The masculine the definite article, has an E in it. He didn't use that. But also words like mère, mother, père, father, famille, family, have the letter E. And this book is all about loss. Georges had lost his mother and father in the Holocaust and close friends. And so there was a conceptual reason for doing this. It wasn't just a sort of fanciful, creative exercise. There's another amazing book, I'm looking over there at my bookshelves, called Life, a User's Manual, which is set in one building in Paris at a moment of time. And it's extraordinary. Another constraint, one building, one moment in time. And Georges says, I set myself rules in order to be totally free. And when you've got the blank page there, it's kind of a terrifying place. You know, if you can do anything, it's very easy to do nothing. But if you give yourself a constraint, you get started. So write down a list of arbitrary constraints. They could be ridiculous. And then try them. So a really nice one is, what if we created our campaign without showing the product? One I used to use when I was making TV stuff was, what if we make this ad without a visual? What if we just do it through words? But what if we created our campaign without showing the product? That's a really healthy way to begin. I think if you're making a commercial. And a lovely illustration of this was a campaign for Ace and Tate last year, I think it was, where they didn't show the sunglasses. And it kind of made them feel quite cool as a brand, and we look for cool sunglasses brands. And of course, people without sunglasses have to squint, which is the reason you need to buy sunglasses. Boom, brilliant. Number 6, can you do the opposite of everyone else? Another of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Karen Nelson Field. If you ever want to truly and completely grab an individual's attention, then you must break their prediction. When a prediction fails, the brain becomes primed to take in and hold new information. People should have this hanging on their wall of their offices, I think, in marketing and creative departments across the land. It would lead to a lot better work, because most of the time, most people make stuff that looks like all the other stuff we've seen. And as a result, it doesn't even go in, you know? Our brains are primed to notice things that are different. Most stuff is not different. There's a brilliant French blogger called Christophe Courtois, and he collects key art and then he assembles it according to trope. So you've got the sort of drama, action, thriller with black and white and a flash of flame, or you've got the lips in close up for something kind of sensual or horror based. Then there's the big eyes. You've got the floating heads. These are sort of for softer Hollywood Hallmark type movies. And then there's a rom-com classic, back to back. His name is Christophe Courtois, Courtois, I think. And I presume Richard is now into the presentation, which is good. You're very welcome. So yeah, this stuff, man, it's like it's a waste of time. Do not make any more of these things. It's a waste of all our time. It's just creating clutter and noise. So how do you get out of the groove of making stuff that everybody else makes? Well, one way is just to keep on going. You know, the first ideas are usually the most obvious, and the ideas that feel most comfortable are often the most conventional. And if an idea makes you feel a little bit uneasy, that's often a good sign. But there's a technique called oppositional thinking. What you do is you list the conventions of your genre, and every genre has conventions. And then you say, well, what happens if I flip them? So, for instance, if you're advertising mortgages, then usually it looks a bit like this. You know, you do something live action, you've got happy couples, and you've got kind of mellow music and like a lovely shallow depth of field, and this is the vibe, and this is why all mortgage adverts look like every other mortgage advert, and they're instantly forgettable and not at all effective. Apart from this campaign for Habito. Now, Habito was a new entrant to the UK mortgage market. It was on the up for a long time. I think there's been a few financial things. Maybe they overexpanded because this campaign was so successful. That would be a good way of getting around that. So I'm going to play this campaign, which took a completely different approach, and I think is a beautiful example of oppositional thinking.
Want to save money on your mortgage? It's either Ow! Or Habito.
Boom, certainly got my attention. Oppositional thinking. Try it next time you're stuck. Number 7, 1 + 1 = 3. Your instant reaction is probably, no, it doesn't. But I've always been a bit shit at maths. I don't literally mean 1 + 1 = 3, but there is a principle in creativity called combinatory creativity, which is where you put two things together that shouldn't go together, and you make something greater than the sum of its parts. So 30 years ago, a Japanese man called Masahiro Hiro was working in a car parts factory, and there were loads and loads and loads of permutations of car parts, and everything was barcoded. But because there were so many different car parts, often one part would have several different barcodes because there's only a limited amount of information you can store on a barcode. And during his lunch break, Masahiro was playing Go, the strategy game. And while he was munching on his sushi and slurping on his miso soup, or not, he thought, hang on a minute, what if I combine the principle of a Go game, which uses 2 axes, with a barcode, and boom, the QR code was born. A QR code being able to store up to 200 times more information than a barcode. It's a really lovely example of putting 2 things together that don't go together. And if you're short of time, then an amazing feature you can use is Special Wiki Random. So if you type Special Wiki Random into Google, you go to this page, and if you click on this page, it will take you to a completely random Wikipedia page, and you get to that page and you look at the thing and you go, well, how could I advertise my thing using that thing? Should we have a go at this? It could go disastrously wrong. Okay, Richard says yes. So let's try and do it. Sam, absolutely. All right, it's on YouTube. If this goes wrong, so I've got a technical thing. So I'm just going to find. Okay, you're there. I need to go to a different tab. If I share my screen, yes, share. Okay, allow. Okay, and then if I go to this and I type Special Wiki Random in, and we go to this page, and we go to this page, boom, off we go. So did that work? Could you see that page just then? Thanks, Callie. Okay, right. Let's say somebody nominate a product. So just write a product into the chat. A car. All right. So we've got a car, and we've got Psalm 27. So we've got to try and come up with a way to sell a car using Psalm 27, which is the 27th Psalm of the Book of Psalms, beginning in English in the King James Version. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Book of Psalms is the 3rd section of the Hebrew Bible. So this is really good. There's loads here. So what we could look at the text and we could change the text. The car could be my light and my salvation. Or maybe it's about fear. You know, maybe this car has got like great safety features, and it could be the fears of the driver, the fear of late night roads, or the fear of other kids in the back going to be okay. Or maybe this car is so great that it started a religion of people who obsess about the car, and the campaign is to dissuade people from loving it too much. You get the idea. It's really, really good fun. If we hit it again, we go to Campaign Castle, which is a castle in Barbados. I'm going to stop sharing now. The larder is my light and my salvation. Who shall I fear? Yeah, exactly. The only danger with this, I've got to warn you, is you may go down a rabbit hole of procrastination, which is not good if the clock is ticking. Right, okay. Let's go back to our deck. Oh, yes. This webinar is free, of course, and I just want to do a small amount of self-promotion, if that's okay. I do interactive in-person workshops for brands, and these are some of the ones, thanks Irene, that I've worked for over the last couple of years. So if you are enjoying this, then why not ask your boss if I can come in and do an in-person workshop for you guys. I'm sharing a handout. Whoops. Oh, I've got no file uploaded. Oh, there it is. I'm going to share a deck of my masterclasses. So you've got it to hand. Okay, small amount of self-promotion. 2 more quick bits. I'm doing a thing for Seed Talks. Seed Talks are amazing. They do lots of stuff on psychedelics, on mental health, all these different kind of interesting talks. And I'm doing a creativity workshop a week on Sunday. It'll be like this, but a bit longer and a bit more interactive. I think it's no more than 20 quid, I think. And also, if you are independent or your boss says no, there's no way I'm getting Richard in, you can say, well, maybe I could just go to one of his sessions. I'm doing this in Soho on the 22nd of February, 2 days after my birthday. It's a half day, and I'll put links to these things. I've got a little, there's EvCom, that's the Soho one, and then Seed Talks is there. So there you go. Okay, right. Yeah, that is my spooky shadow. I actually did a talk for these people, and hang on, let me get. And they can you put the links here? We can only see one at a time. Oh, I see. Okay. Can I do that? Oh, I don't know if I can do that, Krish. I'll put the other one out now. What's the other one? EvCom. And I'll make sure when I send the recording of this that you've got them. Okay, thanks guys. Commercial break over. I'll close that. Move on. Number 8. Can you make the medium the message? So you've been asked to make a TV commercial or do a bit of print advertising or a social ad or something like this. Well, rather than think about what you're going to put within the context of that medium, what if you do something with the medium? Can you use the medium itself in an original and surprising way? Specsavers did this brilliantly last year. They did this special build campaign. Should have gone to Specsavers with the landscape billboard pasted up portrait, or this rather nice one. Should have gone to Specsavers and somebody has pasted over the ladder. Boom. Marmite, a big fan of Marmite and their marketing when they launched their chili version of Marmite, which even as a fan of Marmite, it sounds kind of disgusting to me, but they did this brilliant special build. It's a really lovely illustration of thinking outside of the medium itself and doing something to twist the medium. I don't know if we have anybody from Denmark tuning in today, but I love this from Copenhagen, where the benches have been raised, or some benches have been raised 85 centimeters to illustrate the 1 meter rise in sea level, which Denmark will suffer by the end of the century if nothing is done about the climate emergency. So it's kind of a sort of a meta. Thank you, Jonas. It's kind of a meta way of thinking. Suits smart, witty brands. Can you make the medium the message? I promised Brian Eno. We've arrived at Brian Eno. There he is in his prime, with a cat on his lap. For those of you who don't know, Brian Eno was kind of the guy who founded ambient music. He was lying sick in bed one day and listening to the water trickling down his gutter. But he's a very smart man who thinks a lot about the creative process, is as much artist as musician, and he's produced some great albums. And many years ago, when he was working full-time as a producer, he found often they would hit a hurdle or they would get stuck. And he always wrote down the strategy that they used to get unstuck. And over time, he built up this really big library of cards. And he was chatting to his mate, Peter Schmidt, another artist. And Peter said, well, what if you turn these into an actual deck? And you could share them with people and people could start to use them to solve their own problems. So that's exactly what he did. And you can buy the deck of cards. These are the Oblique Strategy cards by Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt. And the idea is that you, when you're stuck, it's a big old thick deck, you shuffle them, you cut the deck, and you read what the card says. Go to an extreme, move back to a more comfortable place. Great. So you try that. Maybe you've got a slightly conservative brand you're working with, and you go super outlandish, and then you pull it back. Or discard an axiom. I guess by axiom he means like a saying or a truth or a maxim. So what can you discard? And you don't have to buy the cards. Obviously, if you buy the cards, then Brian Eno gets some money and he can carry on doing his thing. But there's an online oblique strategy generator which you can try after this. And it's a great way of introducing a little bit of chaos into the creative process. And then finally, at 10 to 2 in the UK, is my last suggestion. You know, you're struggling. Well, why don't you just steal an idea? 2 skulls. The one on the left is a Homo sapiens skull, and the one on the right is a Neanderthal skull. Sorry, I glitched there. Now, what is really surprising about these 2 skulls is the Neanderthal skull is bigger than the Homo sapiens skull, and yet Neanderthals died out and we're still here. Neanderthals did indeed have bigger brains, bigger skull. So why are they no longer around? And this puzzled scientists for a long time. But they fairly recently worked out that although the Neanderthal brain was bigger, the cerebellum was smaller than ours. And the cerebellum is the part of the brain that deals with higher cognitive skills like language and sharing and this kind of thing. Neanderthals were rubbish at sharing ideas. They were really, really bad at it. So if one Neanderthal tribe discovered something, they wouldn't tell another tribe. They'd just keep it to themselves, and the knowledge would die out with that tribe. Human beings, on the other hand, are amazing at sharing ideas. This is what we call culture. So the idea that nothing comes of nothing is, nothing does come of nothing. The idea that there is such a thing as an original idea, a purely virgin idea, is ridiculous. Every idea is born of another idea. No idea has a virgin birth. Sir Isaac Newton, one of the great scientists and thinkers, recognized this. He said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." What a lot of people don't know is that he pinched that phrase from John of Salisbury. And John of Salisbury got it from a Frenchman called Bernard of Chartres. So even an expression about standing on the shoulders of others was derived from other people. So I think we have to embrace this. Questlove, the DJ and producer, says the DNA of every song lies in another song. All creative ideas are derivative of one another. For my final clip of the afternoon, I wanted to share this. I only chanced upon this recently, but it's brilliant. It's an illustration of what we're talking about. And it's Dave Grohl talking to Pharrell about a very important theft he made.
Good drummer because I'm the most basic fucking drummer. If you listen to Nevermind, the Nirvana record, I pulled so much stuff from the Gap Band and Cameo and Tony Thompson on every one of those songs. All that. That's wow. It's old disco. That's all it is. Can I not hear that? Nobody makes the connection. That's straight up Gap Band. I told Tony Thompson that came to my house for a barbecue with somebody, and I was like, man, I just want to thank you because, you know, I owe so much. I've been ripping you off my whole life. He goes, I know. Whoa. That big disco flam. Like, it works every time.
Great. I love that. Dave Grohl talking about nicking Nirvana flams from disco. But it's really important that I qualify this with the golden rule. The golden rule being steal but don't copy. There's a distinction. To steal is to take something and make it your own. And one way you can be sure that your theft is theft and not cannibalism is take an idea from one genre and bring it into your own genre. It's kind of import, export, as Austin Kleon calls it. So I'm really, please understand, I'm not saying you copy ideas in your own genre. I'm suggesting you steal ideas from other places, from genres outside of your own, from music and painting and art and literature and real life. Jim Jarmusch, James, it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. Absolutely. Jean-Luc Godard said that. Jim Jarmusch says, nothing is original. Steal from anywhere that resonates with inspiration or fuels your imagination. Devour old films, new films, music, books, paintings, photographs, poems, dreams, random conversations, architecture, bridges, street signs, trees, clouds, bodies of water, light and shadows. Select only things to steal from that speak directly to your soul. If you do this, your work and theft will be authentic. Authenticity is invaluable. Originality is non-existent. And don't bother concealing your thievery. Celebrate it if you feel like it. In any case, always remember what Jean-Luc Godard and James said in the chat. It's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. And I like this very much because it's an excuse to read more books and watch more films and listen to more music and look at more paintings, all of which are great things. So to recap then, before we have a little time for questions, so if you have a question, get ready to ask it in the chat. What's the worst idea? Great place to begin, takes the heat off. Can you make the problem the solution? Can you, rather than go obliquely to the problem, embrace the problem? What if you turn it on its head? Dramatize a truth, a simple truth told in a surprising way. That's all you're trying to do. So write down some truths. How could you illustrate them? Don't make it any more complicated than that. What if you take something away that the audience is already familiar with? Rather than add, subtract. Can you give yourself a constraint, a deliberate and arbitrary constraint? And by narrowing things down, it'll force you to be more creative. Try oppositional thinking. What do most people do when they do the thing that you're doing? Write it down and then flip those things. What is the opposite? Does 1 + 1 = 3? Special wiki random. Can we use Psalm 27 to sell larders? Can you make the medium the message? Oblique strategy. Do a Google search and you'll find the online version, and you'll also find how to buy these cards. They're quite expensive, but they are a really nice thing. And how can you steal? What can you take from that genre over there, and how could you reapply it in your own? I have a book. It's called Creative Demons and How to Slay Them. It's available from bookshops and online. There's more of this kind of thing in the book. I also have a free ebook. Oh, thanks, Kai. Thanks, Sarah and John. I've an ebook, so if you sign up to my mailer, you'll get a book called Beavers, Outrage and Blossom, which was the first thing that I wrote. I've only got one copy left, a hard copy. It's in here, but you get that. And Al Murphy, yes, Krish, Al Murphy, my friend Al, who I'm having falafel with next week, did the illustrations, and he's awesome. Follow him on Instagram. So I'm going to do another one of these because most of you stuck around. So thank you very much for sticking around. And it's how to write a brilliant brief on Friday, March the 1st at 1 p.m. A brief is such an important part of the process, and yet most briefs are shit. So I've put together a session. I also do a workshop where I talk about simplicity, inspiration, and truth, the 3 qualities of a great brief. RichardHolman.com is the website. All the stuff I do is there, the blogs and the podcasts and all that nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's all right. Instagram, you'll find me at Richard Holman _creativity. I'm on X, formerly Twitter, Richard _Holman. And I'm just starting to get going on YouTube and TikTok as the creative coach. And by all means, connect on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today and for being active in the chat. I do feel, connected with you. And thanks for the nice comments that are just coming in now. It was so nice, really, during lockdown to do this. Obviously, it's nice now, but I think it's creativity can be quite a lonely pursuit, and the more you can get people together on a similar tip, the better it is. So you're very welcome for, thank you guys for all the nice comments. Does anybody have a question before we sidle slowly into the weekend? Do you have any tips with creative and failures, says Kai? Yeah, I mean, I think, Kai, it's a session in itself, but I think to be creative, you must do things that have never been done before. And if you do things that have never been done before, then sooner or later you will fail. And if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough. However, if you're failing too often, you're probably going to get sacked. Adam Alter, I happen to have his book, this is a great book, Anatomy of a Breakthrough, reckons that about 1 in 6 failures to successes is quite a good ratio. But the way I regard it, the way I get my head around it is when I look back on some of the mistakes that I've made in life and in work, of which there are many now at my tender age of a half century, it's really interesting. They seemed like mistakes at the time, but looking back now in retrospect, I can see that they were really important in somehow getting me to a better place, either in life or in work. So I think about it like Miles Davis said, it's not the note you play that is wrong, it's the note you play afterwards that decides whether it's wrong or right. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But it's not the event that you perceive to be a mistake, but it's what comes next. And that is how I reconcile myself to the inevitability of failure, which happens. Martin has added a really lovely quote from Ken Robinson, the educationalist, I think, did a very famous TED talk. If you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never create anything original. Yeah, that's how it goes. Grayson Parry said, if you're not experiencing self-doubt, you're not trying hard enough. And David Bowie talked about being just a little bit out of your depth. And I think that's nice, you don't want to be drowning out there in the deep, but nor do you want your feet on the bottom. You want to be just a little bit out of your depth, where your feet are not quite touching the bottom. And as David Bowie said, then you're in the place to do something interesting. Irene, quick tip to inspire your creative team, like starting a creative meeting or something like that. Well, I have to say, Irene, that there's this guy, Richard Holman, who does masterclasses. You could get him in, and he would inspire your team. But on a serious tip, I think that one of the best things you can do with creative teams is take them somewhere inspirational. So a gallery with a great show, or a piece of theatre, or a gig, just to top up. One of the things I think we underestimate as creatives is how much we need topping up. So to be creative is to generate stuff, to push stuff out. But if you keep doing that without topping up, then you burn out, you run dry. So I would always, look for something interesting to take my creative team to, or give them a really fun mission to go out and achieve. There's another lovely book by Rob Walker called The Art of Noticing, which is somewhere in here. And he's got all these lovely little projects, like you give everybody a number, and they've got to go out and photograph where they see that number, and then you say, right, if you're going to go up in that number from say 3 to 10, you got to find all the numbers from 3 to 10. You photograph them and you come back. It's a really nice thing. Things like that. Thank you. And Katie says, if there's time, quick tips for selling your idea once you believe you have a good one. I'm going to do a session, Katie, I think, on presenting your ideas, because it's a whole topic in itself. But I think you have to create a series of logical steps from the client's problem to your solution. You have to be able to take them rationally on a journey. And that journey can be a story, but it should behave like a slinky, I think. Slow, incremental steps. And I will talk in the session a bit more about how you might build that story, but I'll save that for another day. Okay, it's 2:05. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along and listening. I will share this recording and hopefully see you on March the 1st at 1 p.m. Nice one. Thanks, everybody. Diolch, Lewis. Cheers, guys. You're very welcome. Thank you, Beth.